Hey guys, this is an excerpt from my fantasy novel, The Price of Renewal. I just released this new copy with a brand new cover. I did this over quite some time, drawing each of these characters and putting them together, and it's just a much sleeker looking, awesome new edition of the book. You can get this on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. But if the price is too high for anyone and you'd still like to get your hands on the book, I also just released a brand new mass market paperback edition, which is about 4.5 by 7 inches, so quite a bit smaller than this one. And that one is going for only $10. So go ahead and pick up your copy today over on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. And let's go ahead and get on with this excerpt. The Price of Renewal by Austin Buffington. Chapter 10. Reverend Aldenor stood on exhausted legs in the damp, cool dungeon beneath Stonereach Castle. His hands were held above his head, wrists cuffed to chains that were pulled taut by their fixtures on the stone wall. Moaning prisoners lined the perimeter of the chamber, the constant clanking of their chains echoing throughout the desolate prison. Many of them were still wearing the same clothes they'd been wearing prior to being brought there. Others were stripped naked. The air smelled of mildew and the rancid scent of rotting human waste. The only light present was that of the moon, which shined through a small grate in the ceiling, their only glimpse of the outside world. Raindrops poured in through the grate from the storm overhead, causing water to pool on the floor. Aldenor had so far only spent half a day imprisoned, but it felt like an eternity. Naya, the woman who had first robbed him, only to be brought together by the identical totems they both possessed, had now betrayed him. As the guards seized him by the arms, she fled into the distance without even a look back. I guess that's what I get for trusting a thief, he considered. Still, he held on to hope. His knapsack was gone, taken by the guards as they chained him to the wall. With it, Aldenor's treasured totem of the great tree. The Reverend didn't need the totem for his faith to remain strong, however. He was on orders from Saranath himself, and he intended to fulfill them. Perhaps this was a test, or a trial designed to force Aldenor's growth. With nothing else to do, he closed his eyes, his hands already held above him, and began to pray. Avire nos Saranath, norium se velcer, thalis un dranir, mau uner nol ther, vathu un serais thariel. You pray for freedom, rasped a voice just barely audible. You say you'll serve Saranath forever. How short-sighted you are. You know the ancient prayers? Aldenor asked, opening his eyes and shifting his gaze to the left, where a decayed whisper of a man stood against the stone wall, chained in the shape of an X. Aye, I've prayed them all in the time I've spent down here, the man replied, his face hardly visible behind a heavy mat of long, scraggly hair. Not one has been answered. Saranath is a lie. The man's beard reached all the way down to his waist, the hair growing from the sides of his head, ending well beyond his shoulders. His eyes were illuminated in the shadowy dungeon by the light from the grate above. Both eyes were cloudy, a pale shade of gray. Perhaps you have forgotten your faith, Aldenor protested. Aye, as will you in time, the man replied. Can you see me? Aldenor asked, noticing the man's eyes. I see you very well in spirit. I've seen nothing with my vision since they blinded me, I'm afraid. Chains rattled from the other side of the room as another prisoner groaned in harmonious agony with the rumble of his stomach. Blinded you? Aldenor pressed. Why? Many times they questioned me to see if I continued believing in the bringer of life, the man explained. I remained steadfast in my faith. So they began to torture me until it was shattered. Now they just leave me here, feeding me only enough to keep me alive. That is abhorrent, Aldenor raged, shaking his chains with disgust. He noticed something in the man's voice as he spoke, a certain familiarity. It was difficult to tell over the strain with which the man spoke, but he almost sounded like Aldenor's old mentor. It can't be, Aldenor thought. You're losing your mind already. I assure you they do not care about moral treatment down here. You best not hope for it, the man added. Aldenor was certain he was beginning to go mad, but he could not deny the uncanny resemblance he was hearing. Reverend? Reverend Eldrick, is that you? The old man craned his neck out toward Aldenor and squinted as if he could suddenly see. He remained silent for a moment and then coughed in an attempt to speak. He had spoken more already in the last few moments than he had in years. It seems my name has not yet been forgotten to time. Aldenor could not believe it. He was certain that Reverend Eldrick must be dead, and thought the destruction of the Stonereach Chapel nearly confirmed it. Reverend, it's me, Aldenor, your student. Reverend Eldrick's jaw dropped, revealing decaying yellow teeth behind his unruly mustache. Dear boy, what in Saranath's name are you doing here? I was personally called upon by Lord Saranath. He spoke to me, Reverend. He actually spoke to me, in a dream. Eldrick closed his mouth briefly, attempting to collect all the saliva he possibly could in order to get out more words. I was wrong to lead you down this path, Aldenor. Saranath does not exist. He does, Reverend, Aldenor protested, his voice bouncing through the cavernous room. I experienced his immense power firsthand. Aldenor was in sheer disbelief. The very man who had taught him the divine way, who had taught him the scriptures and sacred prayers, was right before him now, denying their God. He waited for a response, but Eldrick only hung from the wrist shackles with his eyes closed, his chin tucked to his chest. It seemed he had run out of energy for now. Naya perched atop the grand tower that rose from the roof of Stonereach's theater, the most renowned venue for performances in Ardania. She had come here to her favorite spot for deep reflection just after the rain had stopped, soaking in the sight of the freshly washed city below. In the distance, dark clouds continued to circle Aether Peak, indicating yet another storm on the horizon. Her thoughts dwelled on the man she had met near the entry gates, Aldenor. Guilt gnawed at her ever since the previous night, when he was captured by Thalric's watch. She fled the scene. She had to. If she had lingered to defend the priest, she'd be put in prison, where he surely was now for practicing his religion. Though she had no allegiance to the covenant that Aldenor had spoken of, a long list of crimes loomed over her, reminding her that they might have taken her too. None of her offenses were serious enough to warrant that the guards actually go out and search for her, but if she had remained there, making it easy for them, that would be a different story. In the short period of time that Naya had spent with the priest, he had treated her with respect, treated her as an equal rather than just a lowly scavenger in the streets, the way that everyone else in Stonereach treated her. Most places in the city, her presence was met with, "Shoo!" and "Go on, get!" Things one might say to a rodent. Aldenor was different. Aldenor was kind, and with him came a glimmer of hope. Naya didn't understand his religion, nor his God, but he had spent his entire life in this covenant of renewal, and it seemed obvious to her that he was a good man, earnest and genuine, just like the caregiver that had showed Naya love, Gladia. Both Gladia and Aldenor were deeply religious, their beliefs strong. As a result of this, Naya found herself being drawn to those beliefs. Furthermore, Aldenor was on a journey, one that led far away from Stonereach. This could be her chance to finally leave the city's walls. It would be far too dangerous for her to go alone, but she had connected with Aldenor. Perhaps she could join him on his quest. Naya did not care much of what happened regarding this girl that the priest was sent to retrieve, but she did desire freedom and adventure. She desired a different life. Naya rose to her feet, deciding that she must do something. She must free Aldenor. She stood with her right arm hugging the spire's point that pierced into the sky, the sprawling city of Stonereach all around her. Within these walls, Naya had spent her entire life. Raising her left hand to her brow, she blocked out the rays of sunlight that beamed through a hole in the clouds and peered off into the distance at the great mountain, Aether Peak. Bird-like creatures swooped around toward the top of the mountain just before the clouds. To the right of the mountain, Naya could faintly make out a vast carpet of green. To the left, a wide flowing river. There was an entire world beyond the citadel. What magnificent things might she find out there? Naya slid down the steep slope of the roof, resolute in her decision, her mind floating with wondrous imagination at the promise of a new life. I will find a way to free you, Aldenor, she thought with intense determination as she dived off the side of the roof, plummeting 2 stories into a tall pile of straw on the street below. The townsfolk scrambled in dismay, shrieking at the sight of a woman falling from the roof above. Then the citizens proceeded with their tasks as Naya stood up from the straw unscathed and took off down the street. She would devise a plan to rescue Aldenor, but first, her stomach was calling her attention to a more pressing matter. The market of Stonereach hummed with its usual vibrancy, but today, Naya walked openly amongst the crowd, rather than sneaking around with the covert swiftness she normally relied on. The lively chatter of vendors rang out over the clinking of coins and the shuffle of feet along the stone street, but the clamor seemed less chaotic now, more rhythmic, a steady pulse of daily life. Wooden carts and patchwork tents stretched along the crowded thoroughfare, displaying colorful produce and gleaming trinkets under the beams of sunlight that poked through the clouds overhead. Naya smelled the savory scents of roasted meat and spiced teas, calling out to her groaning belly. She couldn't help but notice the increased number of stares she received, no longer the invisible shadow she had been. She didn't let it get to her, however. Today was a good day. She could feel it. She would make up for leaving Aldenor to the guards by rescuing him and aiding him along his journey. "Spare coin?" Naya heard a voice wheeze from the side of the road. She glanced to her left to see a beaten-down man sitting on the ground with his hands stretched out, begging. The crowd parted as they walked past him, as though his misfortune was a contagious disease. The man slapped his own face every few moments as the occasional fly landed on his cheek. He stood out amongst the crowd, his clothing loose, hanging against his scrawny, emaciated body. Naya saw him and knew his pain with a deep understanding. She closed the distance between her and the man, walking through the crowd to the opening they had created. "Spare coin?" the man asked again, this time directed to Naya. His face was twisted in puzzlement as his gaze traveled from her head to her feet. "Never mind, miss. I see you are in need just as I." Naya did not respond to the man's accusation. She just reached her hand into her pocket and grabbed a couple of coins between her 4 fingers. His eyes lit up, gleaming as they caught sight of the shining coins as she held them out toward him. She released them into his hands, then continued walking through the crowd. "Thank you, miss. Thank you," he called out. "Saranath bless you." Saranath. There's that name again, Naya thought as she matched the pace of traffic. Maybe there's something to all this religion stuff. Naya approached the stall of the baker she had so recently stolen from. The familiar smell of warm, fresh loaves of bread drifted toward her, just as tantalizing as before, though this time it tugged at her with less desperation. The heavy-set baker bore a focused expression as he kneaded dough behind the counter, his sleeves rolled up to reveal flour-dusted forearms. The steady rhythm of his work grounded Naya, the slap of dough against wood providing a strange sense of calm. Naya hesitated for a moment, her gaze catching on the very spot where she'd once crouched in the shadows, her heart pounding as she made her escape. Confident in what she was about to do, she waited in line behind only a single customer. The line was shorter today than the last time she'd seen it. Patiently, the male customer waited as the baker finished his task of preparing the dough, then turned and smiled at Naya, something she was very unaccustomed to. "Old Gareth makes the best rye in town, wouldn't you say?" the customer asked her. "Oh, She hesitated, slightly startled. Yes, it's very good. I come here once a week to get a loaf. It's my special treat. Naya could hardly think of a response. She was not used to ordinary people on the streets attempting to converse with her. All right, Eden. The usual? The baker asked the man at the front of the line as he wiped off his hands with a dusted white cloth. Yes, sir, the man replied. You know me well. Gareth the baker reached onto the cart behind him and grabbed a crusty, dark brown loaf that made Naya's mouth water. He tore the loaf in half, letting out a crisp crackle. Here ye are, Gareth said, handing the half loaf to his loyal customer. And for you, miss? He asked, his voice directed at Naya. I don't recognize your face, ma'am. Oh, I've been told that I must try your bread, sir, she said as her face took on a bashful hue of pink. Absolutely. I'm glad ye came. Rye? Yes, sir, she replied. Gareth grabbed the half of the loaf that he hadn't given to the previous customer and handed it to Naya. That'll be 1 silver. Oh, yes. Naya reached into her pocket and withdrew 4 silver coins, then handed the lot over to Gareth. He looked down at the coins in his palm in confusion. Ma'am, you've given me a few too many. Gareth stopped speaking as he looked up to see that the woman had already walked away. Naya strolled along the path, heading toward the castle as she munched down her bread. It tasted better than ever now. She didn't know why, but she suspected it was because she hadn't stolen it. The guilt that normally accompanied her dining was no longer present. Instead, she was filled with satisfaction, for she had not only paid for her meal, but also for a few others that she had acquired in the past through unjust methods. Up ahead, King Thalric's castle loomed before her, ominous in its mass that was dwarfed only by the enormity of the mountain behind it. Naya rarely ever wandered all the way to the castle. It was sandwiched between the noble district and the trade quarter, 2 places that she did not belong. The castle rose above the majority of Stonereach, a sentinel over the city. Its jagged towers pierced the sky, draped in the shadow of Aether Peak beyond. A solitary flag flapped lazily atop the highest tower, the emblem of the king, barely visible under the blinding rays of light that stretched throughout the clouds above. Naya began to pace around the castle, keeping her distance, but taking in as much information as she possibly could. It was a heavily guarded fortress, no doubt. All around the castle, the men of Thalric's watch stood sentry. They continuously scanned the crowd in the street, ready and prepared to apprehend anyone that decided to get any bright ideas. Long, intimidating swords sat sheathed on their hips. Armor glistened against the beams of light from the sky, reflecting it into Naya's eyes, causing her to squint. All right, Aldenor, she thought. How am I going to get you out of here?